Hi, and welcome to Tapp Middle School's Data Overview, submitted by Crystal Young Bonner. This presentation is intended for the Science Department of Tapp Middle School. However, if others find this information valuable, we would welcome your feedback. Also, this information will be shared with other core content areas at the school. The purpose of the Data Overview is to review school-wide demographic changes in the last 3 years that could have or are currently affecting scholar performance. We're going to review Science Georgia end-of-grade testing data for the school as compared to district and state results. We'll analyze data to formulate short-term goals to improve 8th grade science proficiency. And while we're focusing on 8th grade science proficiency, we will see and review and analyze in subsequent meetings the impact of 6th and 7th grade instructional practices. But 8th grade is the focus currently because that's the only grade level whose data is reported with the end of grade testing. We'll identify strengths and weaknesses of current science instructional practices. And we'll also review school attendance data. The data sources that were used for this presentation include the Georgia Milestones, the science content of the Georgia Milestones, science EOG material and information, CCRPI enrollment, demographic, and attendance data. Questions that we'd like for you to ponder include: what are scholars' science strengths? What instructional practices are working? What are currently known weaknesses in the instructional program? How can other core content area educators support the science instructional program? And how can the science department utilize short-term data to effectively inform and adjust ongoing instructional practices? It is important that we look at enrollment, attendance, and other pieces of demographic information that will help inform our decisions about what is going to be best for our instructional practices and will give the most impact for our scholars. So in the state of Georgia, enrollment by race is as follows. The number of white scholars is declining, while the number of African American and Asian students remain the same from 2015 through 2017. There has been a slight increase in the number of Hispanic scholars in the area. The number of multiracial scholars has remained relatively unchanged, with only a slight increase between 2015 and 2016. The number of Indian and Pacific Islander scholars is less than 1% of the total number of scholars enrolled in the state of Georgia. In Cobb County, the enrollment of white and African American scholars is declining by a small percentage, while enrollment of Hispanic scholars is steadily increasing. Enrollment of Asian, Indian, and multi-ethnic scholars remained at or less than 6% of the total scholar enrollment for the district. And at Tapp Middle School, the number of African American scholars is steadily declining, while Hispanic scholar enrollment remains and continues to increase. There was a slight decrease between 2016 and 2017. Less than 1% of the scholars have identified themselves as Indian, Asian, or multiracial, and therefore the percentage points do not show up when the data is graphed. It's important to look at the school staff, race, and ethnic composition. This can, in some situations, have a negative impact on instructional practices at the school. At Tapp Middle School, however, The majority of staff members are African American, which is representative of the student enrollment. The second highest representation is of white staff members, followed by Hispanic staff members. During the 2015-2016 school year, Asian Pacific Islanders had the lowest rate of absenteeism, whereas white students had the highest number of absenteeisms in the range of students or scholars who were absent 6 to 15 days. There seems to be an increase in the number of scholars that are absent for 6 to 15 days during the 2015-2016 school year. The only subgroup that this did not affect was the Asian Pacific Islanders. They remained steady. There has been a significant increase in the number of days that white scholars are absent over the 2014-2015 school year. The other subgroups have similar rates of absenteeism. Tapp Middle School earned a CCRPI score of 81.7 in 2017, which is higher than both the district and state scores. There was a slight dip between 2015 and 2016, but that was recovered and surpassed between 2016 and 2017. Cobb County as a whole experienced a dip between 2015 and 2016, but has recovered and earned a CCRPI score of 81.4 in 2014. The state CCRPI average has increased each year. The majority of scholars are performing in the beginning and developing categories in the state of Georgia. There has been an increase in the percentage of scholars scoring at a proficient and distinguished level. In 2017, there was a notable increase in the number of scholars who scored in the beginning range, while there was a significant increase in the number of scholars in the developing level. In Cobb County, there was an upward trend in the number of scholars performing at the proficient and distinguished levels. There was a slight increase between 2015 and 2016 in the number of scholars at the developing level, followed by a significant decline in 2017. The decline seems to be the cause for the significant increase in the distinguished and proficient categories and slight increase in the beginning category. Tapp Middle School has seen a steady increase in the number of scholars at the proficient level, while the numbers fluctuate for the distinguished, developing, and beginning categories. Science EOG data reveals that the number of scholars obtaining proficiency has increased from year to year. Due to no scholars identifying themselves as Asian or American Indian, there's no data for this subset. The number of African American, Hispanic, students with disabilities, and economically disadvantaged scholars obtaining proficiency on the Science EOG testing has steadily increased. White students have shown a decline in the number of scholars that show proficiency. So, what are the areas of strength? Well, I've identified 4. Tapp Middle School has earned a CCRPI score that is higher than the state and local school districts this year. The number of scholars demonstrating proficiency on the science end of grade testing has steadily increased. The ethnic composition of the educational staff is representative of the ethnic composition of the scholars who attend Tapp Middle School. The rate of absenteeism has not created a decline in the number of scholars scoring proficiently on the Science EOG. So what are our areas of focus? The number of scholars in the traditional subgroups is one area of focus. the increase of absenteeism in white scholars, and the decline in the number of scholars scoring at the proficient level on the end of grade science assessment. So here are some questions that we want to ponder and try to obtain answers to. How does attendance negatively impact performance in the classroom? And how can we positively impact scholar attendance? How can we change the negative performance trend and increase scholar achievement? The scholar demographics significantly impact our instructional approach. What classroom strategies were and are currently being used to combat attendance issues and address scholar learning problems? How can local data be used to evaluate instructional impact and the number of scholars performing proficiently on the Georgia Milestones Assessment? So, what are our next steps? We need to discuss and provide preliminary answers to the questions on the previous slide. Review data in grade level team meetings and determine how each team impacts 8th grade scholar achievement, because everything is scaffolded upon and new materials introduced at each grade level. Discuss whether or not critical instructional practices need to be reevaluated. Agree on a plan to address scholar learning problems and discuss how progress monitoring will occur.